Good evening from New York. I am Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. The distinguished looking gentleman next to me is Minister and fourth Vice President Sidney Allicock, who was sworn in as Guyana's fourth Vice President Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs on May 15, 2015. He hails from the North Rupununi, Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo Region 9. Vice President Allicock, widely accepted as a pioneer of community-based tourism in Guyana, was awarded the Anthony N. Sabga Laureate for public and civic contributions in 2010 and is well positioned to represent the indigenous people of Guyana. Minister, good evening and welcome to CWS.
Good evening, and I must thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share with you, I think, a story that is needs to be told.
I so agree. Minister, when those people who are close to you describe you, what do you usually agree with in their description?
I kindly come again. I didn't get you
All
there
right.
too.
Okay. What do you agree with when those close to you describe you? How do?
I
Sorry.
okay. I I think they have great confidence in me making a contribution, making a difference in the development of the hinterland by understanding what it is to be living in a world that is real. So, with the regular or the continuous interaction with members of the hinterland, especially the natural environment, we think there is something there that needs to be shared to the wider Guyanese society and even beyond. So it is like a brotherhood on this journey that we enjoy together.
Minister, you're from North Rupununi, Region 9. I had the honor and privilege of visiting there recently. We'll talk about that later. But what are some things you believe um, most people do not know about this region?
I think because you have the majority of Guyanese living on the narrow coast of Guyana and looks out overseas rather than within the trees, they have very little knowledge. The majority of Guyanese have very little knowledge of the value of this beautiful country that we call Guyana, Guyana, land of many waters. And it is something that needs exploring. For us to benefit truly from this beautiful landscape, it is about unifying the nation. And we can only do that by opening up what we'll say, having the infrastructural work done to allow the hinterland or indigenous peoples to be part of the decision making, the discussion, the planning, and the implementation, and also management of the way forward in a green economy.
Now, here's an indigenous person who is in a decision-making position. Is fourth vice president in the current government. Did you expect, when you were a young man growing up, did you ever think you would have served in the government of Guyana in any capacity whatsoever?
I had not the slightest idea that one day I could have been in this position because of the situation then. It was difficult to access higher education. So it was a distant, it was not even a dream. But here I am, and I must give thanks to the leadership of this country, who happens to be the president, President Ranger, and the Prime Minister Nagamutu. Those are the two leaders of this country at the moment, and they are very very positive in the development of this country.
Minister Allicock, take us back to that moment when you were told, however it happened, that you were going to be the fourth vice president.
It was what the papers said. I just would like to see what the papers said at the time. It was like Allicock from the bush to the limousine. It was like actually saying like coming from nothing to something great. I sort of parachuted into this position, and it took me some time before I really realized what a serious and responsible position it was, and it is until now. But with the encouragement and the confidence given in supporting me, that was what really supported me to take on the responsibility, because I felt the confidence in the persons who supported me to be here.
Minister, I was introduced to the Bina Hill institution. I will ask you about the Bina Hill institution specifically in a moment, but I brought it up because it reflects your passion and commitment to empowering young people in Guyana, but especially the youth, the indigenous youth of Guyana. But what I would like you to do, Minister, is take us back in time to that young indigenous boy, that young Sydney Allicock, that 9-year-old boy. What was it like growing up for you?
It was a way of freedom for me to be interacting with the elders, learning from their experiences, looking at the natural environment, and understanding the value of the managers of the ecosystems, which means understanding the laws of nature, understanding what Mr. Ortworm was doing, what was his responsibility, what Miss Fish was doing in the rivers, what Mr. Monkey, what was his job there in the environment, what like the other animals, the other insects, the trees, the plants, and most of all, the understanding of the indigenous peoples of how they manage the natural environment without greed, but rather with a passion of understanding of if the forest is standing, we all stand, we all win in that environment. So that was one great part that I always remember, the freedom of being able to make decisions, being able to understand that I could live off the natural environment by understanding the value or what the uses are or were of those plants or still are. And to have fresh air and to have fresh water, to have peace of mind, to have joy, to have love for one another. Rather than being competitive, we were supportive, a supportive group. We worked in a way of unity, strength. We found strength in supporting one another. So The difficulty was to learn another language, which is the English language,
Mhm.
and to learn other ways, which they call education, giving me that feeling that, there was not education where we lived. And to learn language, it was a great challenge. I was even whipped along with some other friends for speaking out our language, or just playing a game in our language, and that was something that I grew with, continuously wondering why it was so bad to learn or to speak one's language. So, having that in mind, I grew up thinking that one day, hopefully, the opportunity will come for, if not myself, others to help in putting things right, if I may use those words. And today, the opportunity is here. Nothing, I think, happens before its time. And today, that opportunity is here. I started in community politics, regional politics, and then I I continued to see that the focus was on was on the coast rather than in the hinterland. You would hear so many times developers, policymakers saying we are going to take education into the hinterland or to the indigenous peoples. But I prefer to hear them say we are going to share education, because that is what it is. We have had education for many, many decades. And to survive, you had to know what plants to use, how to take, for example, the cassava. It's a very poisonous root, but we have been able to turn that into edible stuff. It is now we have over 15 byproducts from that very root that has been the tree of life for us. And I would not be able to say how many people uh, suffered to get it right, but we have it as a product now, and today we are trying to get it on the bigger market through community development.
Minister, your parents, what were they like? Disciplinarians? What were they like growing up when you were growing up as a child?
Okay, well, of course, in those times, the church had a great influence on the indigenous peoples. We had to learn the Ten Commandments. We had to learn the goodness of the Bible. We had to we had to uh, we had to be disciplined. There was this saying, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," and they were very strict because they worked closely with the church, and the churches had great influence on the teachings. So the teachers were also part of that process of trying to get us right, as they would say. So they were very strict on us, not to speak our language, but to learn the English language, and we're still learning it. But it has been uh, something to think about, something to work for. And in some ways, it was good. In some ways, it was bad because the teaching us to move away from ourselves. And even on to now, the teachings from kindergarten to university is not necessarily preparing you to go to return when you're finished into your community to help that community, because you would have been taught probably to go to the moon or to do other things, but not necessarily how community based agriculture could be done, or community based tourism, or community based living could be done. It was a difficulty. So while you would have had the university education, it did not mean that you could return to help your community because you did not understand the laws of nature. You forgot the laws of nature, and you couldn't very well give the community or even your parents that support at community level, community development. So it is a time now that we need to integrate the two. We
Mm-hmm.
need to return, we need to give more support to hinterland institutions or create institutions that will be able to give our people in the hinterland that opportunity to make a contribution to national development.
Which takes me into the whole Bina Hill institution discussion. So, for those who don't know, can you describe Bina Hill, the Bina Hill institution for us? What? Well, let's start with what inspired it.
Okay, for uh, a region with just about 20,000 people, it's we just have four secondary schools in that entire area, entire region. And only in 2003 we were able to get a secondary school in the North Rupununi region, Region 9. And there is, from then to now, from starting with just about 43 students, we now have close to 600 students. And the population of the indigenous peoples in Guyana is rapidly increasing. And for the secondary school, while that is now available, we hadn't, or we do not have, at the time, we did not have the opportunity for higher learning. And while the schools would have had, the secondary school would have had, like every year, let us say you have 100 students graduating, 10% of that population will get to higher education, maybe university, maybe to college, maybe jobs. But the rest are left like unguided missiles. They are there with nowhere to go, no opportunities. And that drove us to look for a way of accommodating these youths. And that is when the idea of the Bina Hill Institute was born. Shared the idea, we sold the idea, we're still trying to sell this idea, but now it is more relevant than ever before. And I'll tell you why. We have just discovered oil in abundance, oil by the billions of barrels. But we're not looking, or we shouldn't look at the direct benefits, but the indirect benefits. Meaning, getting in readiness, getting the workforce in readiness for that eventual takeoff of development for this country. We have to learn from those oil rich countries and not to reinvent the wheel or not to make the same mistakes. And to do that, we have to have an educated population. And for us to have that educated population, it is best for us to create or develop institutions in the hinterland, such as the Bina Hill, where those young adults, and for us, the indigenous peoples, because of the culture, we mature very quickly. We are very creative with our hands. We understand the value of having a standing forest. We understand the value of protecting the natural environment. We understand the value in having a healthy ecosystem. And we also understand that we could have the natural environment giving us the economic strength that we so badly need for the communities to be economically strong. And that is what we call the green gold. And talking about the green gold means to have the use of fruits, the use of the oils from palms, the different produce from the forest, agricultural produce, because we cannot forget our food. We also see the value in developing the savanna lands through organic manure or being organic. And here is where the young people will be given the opportunity to have that skill so as to become the engineers of tomorrow, preparing today. And take, for example, we have technology, and we use the good technology to build on the capacity that we have within these communities in IT, in mechanics, in the engineering section, in the renewable energy with regards to solar, wind power, hydro, engineering qualities of road, building roads, building bridges. Also, to look at, I think one of the best options would be the community based tourism or culture tourism, tourism generally, but things that the communities could handle, community based tourism. And that is being able to take customers in the various areas, in hiking, for nature lovers, for cultural lovers, for hiking, boat rides, and to even do research. We are in an area that is heavily, what we would call it, protected in the sense of protected areas. We have a Wakrama, we have the Kaicho protected area, we have the Kanaku protected area, and we have one of our first indigenous protected area, that of our YY brothers further south between Brazil and the Guyana border. Mm-hmm. So it is about establishing an institution that will give hope to our young leaders. Leadership is a critical component if we are going to help to build this nation and give the opportunity to our young indigenous people to become part of the process of development. So leadership, confidence in our young people is a great need at the moment. And I have found that we have persons within the country, young people right within this country, who could give that assistance. Persons, say, for example, in the science world, who could give us that, let's say from the University of Guyana, like from the IEST, we have scientists there who we've been working with. And in partnership, we could do so much to help the hinterland, helping the hinterland development. I would like to say that I'm speaking about Region 9 mostly because here is where the only road through this country will become a reality. It is the last link for joining the other roads of South America. And Lethem, which is in Region 9, has recently been commissioned or declared a town There is going to be an international airport. It is already a port of entry, and it is going to bring a lot of activities, especially from South America and for the South America. And we would have to find ways and means of using the road rather than the road using us. And that is why it is so necessary for us to have young leaders who will be able to help us to unite the nation, who will be able to educate others, the majority of the Guyanese people, to show what a wonderful country we have and which we could manage together. We have to manage this together in partnership and to build a sort of education, appropriate education for the survival of our people, because we are on what we call the Guyana Shield, the sort of center of that shield. We are also part of the Amazon basin. And in these times, climate change is so, it is real. We need a lot of scientists, we need more people to understand how we could manage our natural environment in a more serious manner, in a way that there is cut down on greed and work on our agricultural base so that we have what we call healthy eating, organic stuff, fresh foods, and as long as the stomach is filled, we think about the other things. But when the stomach is empty, we think about filling the stomach, and we could get into trouble. So the institution is to help our young people in the hinterland to have that access to higher appropriate education. So we become part of the workforce of building this nation. And eventually, when it is successful or more successful, we will be able to replicate the idea in the other regions, regions 1, 7, and 8.
Minister,
It is the expectation to work closely with the University of Guyana. As a matter of fact, we already have two young people from the Bina Hill Institute, from the first batch of that institution at the university, doing agriculture and tourism. We have 8 others at the IAST doing marketing and doing the science part of putting the right measurements and doing research on crops that are in the forest that could become economic projects. We are working towards building a better workforce that will be able to help us to manage better the communities, the regions, and generally the country. We need a lot, and now is the time. And that institution, I just hope that we will be able to have the support needed. We've just done our budget, and in the budget, it is for debate now, and we just hope that it will be given the green light so that we could get on with the work of truly putting up this institution that will help our indigenous peoples to be.
I hope so too, Minister. But I'm curious, the Bina Hill institution, how how does a candidate get selected to be part of that institution? What is the process?
Okay, here is what happens. Applications, we advertise, and those young people who feel that they need a shot at the school for it has to come from them. They apply, and there is a screening, because what has happened is that we do not have the space to accommodate the volume that we see now is really developed. It's a great interest in persons wanting to be part of that institution. So what we do is a lot of screening, and we've noticed a lot of young women who are in the forefront of wanting to be able to get that opportunity. So what happens? They do not pay. They do not pay to enter. We look at their background, get the recommendations from the communities that they come from, and we accommodate them. We give them a stipend, but the real, what I should call the realness in this, if that's the right word, is to allow these young people to be enrolled, and during the course they have 2 years, 1 year to venture into the various areas. We have about 6 subjects that they would toy around with. But this final year, which is the second year, they have to determine which of those subjects they would like to qualify in, to become specialized in. And as soon as they arrive, they start to work. Work meaning theory and practice goes together. They have to do things like chicken. They learn how to not only feed the chicken or just to water the chicken, but to study the whole anatomy of the chicken. Study what the feed is about, how nutritious it is, and also to see how you feed the persons who buy the feed. Also cattle, the milk, the crops. So they would sell what they don't use, and in that way they would be paying their fees. So the arrangement is part of the sales. The profits is divided, part for themselves, part for the, I can't remember the exact percentage, part for the institution itself, part for maintenance, and another part for the next batch that would be coming in. So it is about them exercising the ability to do business in varying areas, in the tourism, in the buy and sell, in the games, and that will help them to know what is responsibility, what is accountability, and what it means to be consistent, and what it means to work as a team, and what it means to have the sustainability of such an institution. It is expected that within the next, say, 20 years, the institution should be self-sufficient of its own doing, and so it will begin to return that benefit to communities around the area.
Minister, are you surprised? Are you surprised that the government has bought into this idea, this project, and is supporting it?
I am not really surprised. I'm happy actually, because it was well, I don't want to call it a time bomb, but it was something that I think needed the sort of selling, the promotion that was needed. And people like yourselves who came would whisper to someone else while we have that discussion, and then you see the deeper value in it if we all give that support. And I think here is where projects such as honey beekeeping, um, the, as I said, the bead collection, the paints and the arts and the sculpting and the music that you develop there, it has proven that it could work. All we need is to be consistent and organized, and that is the stage that we are going to. So we would need a lot of persons with that skill, young people, to help the other younger persons to get the confidence. It is about confidence building, and that is where the leadership comes in. because our communities, we have to move away from the dependency syndrome. We have to find a way of what they call it, teach a man to fish, and he would have fish for the balance of his life.
On that note, Minister, on that note, let's take a quick break. And when we get back, I want you to talk about Surama.
Okay.
Right? Let's take a quick, very
Yes,
quick
yes.
break.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.